All right, ready to dive in. Today, we're looking at security, but not just the typical stuff. We're going deeper.
Yeah, the stuff that really keeps, world leaders up at night.
Exactly. And we've got a really interesting mix of sources for this one. Academic papers, government reports. We even have,
Boots on the ground accounts.
yeah. So we're talking about connecting the dots, finding those patterns that often go unnoticed in, all the noise.
And it is fascinating to see how issues that seem totally separate are actually like really deeply connected. For example, cybersecurity.
Yeah.
I mean, we tend to think of cybersecurity as like its own thing, right? But more and more, it's becoming securitized.
Securitized, huh? That sounds like one of those kind of jargony terms. What does it really mean?
Yeah, you're right to call that out. It is a bit jargony. But it does have real-world impacts. Basically, it means something is now seen as a, top-level security threat. It's not just everyday politics anymore.
Got it. So, like, a government might be willing to, I don't know, maybe even limit certain freedoms to deal with that threat.
Exactly. That's the kind of weight securitization carries.
Okay, I'm definitely paying attention now. So, where are we seeing this play out?
Well, look at Indonesia. They've been super proactive on cybersecurity. They even enacted this regulation number 47 of 2023.
Okay.
It outlines their whole national cybersecurity strategy. What's interesting is how broad it is. I mean, they've identified 7 key areas.
Wow, 7. What are they?
Okay, so you've got national resilience, data sovereignty, human resources, the digital economy, technology, and defense. And get this, they even have a dedicated national crisis center.
Wow.
Just for cyber incidents.
Wow, 7 areas. That's a pretty comprehensive approach. What's making this such a high priority for Indonesia, would you say?
Well, Indonesia is developing so fast, their digital economy is booming, but that makes them a target for cyber attacks, right?
Yeah, I see that.
Think about it. Disruptions to essential infrastructure, data theft, they could even undermine democratic processes. I mean, by really emphasizing cybersecurity, they're saying this isn't just an IT problem, it's a core national interest that they are ready to defend.
And it's interesting because one of our sources suggests that Indonesia could actually become like a cyber protector
Yeah.
for the whole Southeast Asian region. They're not just defending themselves, they're trying to raise the bar for everyone.
Exactly. Indonesia's in a great position to lead here. They've got the legal framework in place. They understand the regional cyber threats. They could really change the game in building regional cyber resilience.
I mean, that's pretty amazing. So we've got the cyber domain.
Yeah.
Then we have this other study about, the difficulties of repairing warships in Indonesia. What?
Right.
How does that even fit in here?
Well, it's a perfect example of how something very technical can have huge strategic implications. So this study looks at the occupational safety in Indonesian shipyards,
Okay.
specifically the risks that workers face when they're repairing warships. Yeah, and it gets into the nitty-gritty. We're talking about, working in these super cramped spaces filled with CO2, needing specialized heavy lighting equipment. It's a tough job.
Yeah, I can imagine. Not your typical 9 to 5. So where's the connection to security?
The study links workplace safety directly to, national resilience. Think about it. If a Navy wants to be strong, it can't just be about avoiding accidents. It's about being able to defend the country's interests.
Right.
So if your ships are always in for repairs, it weakens your defense overall.
I see. So even something like shipyard safety, which seems, pretty mundane at first,
Totally.
can actually have this ripple effect on the country's security on a much larger scale.
It's all connected, like a chain reaction. Each link is essential.
Okay. Makes sense. Now let's shift gears to a different kind of threat, something that's become, unfortunately, really common: fake news
Oh, yeah.
and hate speech online. And we have this source that really digs into this, focusing on Nigeria. It's a bit disturbing how quickly misinformation spreads online these days.
It really is. And this study actually shows that, get this, fake news travels faster than real news on social media.
Really?
Yeah, it's a huge problem. It erodes trust in institutions, it makes people more divided, and can even lead to actual violence in the real world.
Absolutely. One detail that really struck me was how vulnerable young people are to this stuff.
Yeah, that makes sense, right? They spend so much time online, especially on social media, where these things just explode. They might not have the critical thinking skills yet or the life experience to really tell what's real and what's fake. It makes them easy to manipulate.
It's a global issue, for sure.
Yeah.
And it really ties back to that idea of national resilience we were talking about earlier. When a nation is divided and distrustful, It's just inherently more vulnerable.
It absolutely is. And we see this fascinating dynamic between geography and conflict when it comes to Papua, Indonesia.
So now we're talking about, like, the actual physical terrain.
Yeah. Yeah. We have this study that looks at how the mountains and dense forests in Papua have actually contributed to the high levels of violence there.
Oh, wow.
It makes it incredibly difficult for, security forces to operate effectively and for the government to maintain control.
I see. So how do you even address that?
Well, the study suggests some pretty high-tech solutions. They propose using advanced geospatial intelligence, things like LiDAR technology and 3D mapping,
Okay.
to really understand the terrain and plan better counterinsurgency operations.
Interesting.
Yeah. LiDAR is particularly fascinating. It uses lasers to create these incredibly detailed 3D models of the Earth's surface. You can use it to find hidden trails, potential ambush sites, even track the movements of armed groups.
Whoa, that's like giving security forces X-ray vision.
Mm,
But it makes you think about the human element, too.
right.
Can technology really help us grasp those complex motivations driving conflict?
That's the big question, isn't it? And it underscores how important it is to have a multifaceted approach to security, one that combines the cutting-edge technology with good old-fashioned human intelligence, cultural understanding, and, a real commitment to dialogue and peace building.
It's about seeing the whole picture, not just what the technology shows us.
Yeah.
Okay, let's talk about another big picture topic, energy. One of our sources looks at Indonesia's energy policies and how vulnerable they are to global oil price changes.
Right. Indonesia has a solid national energy policy in place, but they still rely heavily on imported oil. That leaves them exposed to global shocks, like we saw with those price spikes after the conflict between Russia and Ukraine.
Oh, definitely. And this comparison in the study really puts things in perspective. Indonesia's operational oil reserve can only last about 23 days. That's a lot less than the strategic reserves of countries like the U.S. and China.
Right, it is. And that difference matters because it speaks to a nation's ability to withstand those unexpected crises, to keep essential services running when things get tough. Energy security is really fundamental to national security. If you can't fuel your economy or your military, you're vulnerable.
It really makes you think about how you balance economic development with security needs, especially when you depend on other countries for something as basic as energy.
Yeah, it's a tough balancing act. And actually, we have two studies here that address that exact issue in the context of Indonesia. The first one points out this growing concern that Indonesia's consistently low military spending might actually be hurting their long-term defense goals. They might just not have the resources to modernize their armed forces enough to, keep up with potential threats in the region.
That's a big concern.
Right.
So what's the solution?
Well, the second study suggests that the key is focusing on really strong GDP growth. Even if defense spending, as a percentage of GDP, stays relatively low, if the economy is booming, it still means more resources for the military. It's not just about spending more money, it's about spending it in a smart way.
So it's not just the size of the pie, it's how you slice it.
Exactly. Prioritizing investments in things like arms acquisition, research and development, building up their domestic defense industry.
Makes sense. Investing strategically to maximize those capabilities.
Right. Now, before we move on to the next topic, I just have to share a couple more little details from our sources. I think they're really interesting.
Oh, I love those little nuggets. Okay, hit me.
Okay, well, there's this fascinating comparison between the training programs of the KNIL and PETA.
Okay. Remind me, who were those again?
The KNIL was the Royal Netherlands East Indies Army, trained by the Dutch, and PETA was the Defenders of the Homeland Army, trained by the Japanese during World War II.
Okay.
These two groups, they had very different training philosophies, and they really laid the foundation for the Indonesian military as we know it today.
Oh, so we're talking about two completely different approaches to, like, the very idea of what a military should be.
Exactly. The KNIL was all about, Western military professionalism, emphasizing discipline, hierarchy, a clear separation from civilian life. PETA, on the other hand, was influenced by the Japanese Bushido Code. They emphasized things like loyalty, self-sacrifice, and a really close relationship between the military and the people.
I bet those contrasting influences are still felt in the Indonesian military today.
Oh, for sure. It's like this historical echo that continues to resonate.
So cool.
Anything else?
One more thing. One of our sources talks about the challenges faced by the ASEAN Regional Forum, the ARF.
Yeah.
They're trying to implement confidence-building measures in the South China Sea, but It's tricky.
Oh, yeah. The South China Sea, always a geopolitical hotspot. What's going on there? It's a really complex situation with all these overlapping territorial claims and competing interests. The ARF is working hard to, reduce tensions and prevent conflict through dialogue, cooperation, and transparency.
I can only imagine how difficult that is.
It is, but the stakes are really high, right?
Absolutely.
The South China Sea is such a crucial route for global trade. It's rich in resources, and it's strategically vital for a lot of countries. Any instability there could impact the entire world.
Yeah, that's true. It really highlights how security is about so much more than just military power. It's about diplomacy. It's about relationships. Sometimes the best defense is just a well-crafted conversation.
I totally agree. Okay, last nugget, I promise.
Lay it on me.
Okay, so this source talks about the importance of biodiversity conservation and disaster prevention efforts in Indonesia. Now, that might seem a little off topic, but
You're going to tell me it's all connected.
you know it.
Yeah.
It all comes back to that idea of a holistic approach to security. The source argues that environmental, economic, and social factors are all intertwined.
Okay, yeah.
So disaster prevention and environmental protection aren't just about, saving trees and animals. It's about protecting people, livelihoods, and ultimately national security.
I see. It's about understanding those connections. How seemingly different issues can actually converge and impact security in a big way.
Exactly. It's about recognizing that security is multidimensional, and we need a comprehensive strategy to tackle the full range of threats and challenges.
Absolutely. Okay, so bringing it back to where we started,
Right.
we've gone from cyber threats to warship repair, the global energy landscape, and everything in between.
And we've seen how these issues, even though they seem separate, are actually all connected and contribute to the complex tapestry of national security.
This has been quite a deep dive so far, and I think the key takeaway is that in today's world, security isn't just about military strength or technology. It's about resilience, being able to adapt, and understanding the interconnected forces shaping the world around us.
I completely agree.
But we're not done yet. There's still a lot more to uncover. Stick with us as we delve even deeper into the complexities of security in this rapidly changing world.
It's going to be fascinating. It really is amazing how, history shapes the present, right?
Oh, totally. It's like those historical echoes you mentioned earlier, still influencing how we approach security today.
Exactly. And speaking of echoes, our next stop takes us back to the South China Sea. That region where the past and present are always kind of clashing.
Yeah.
One of our sources actually dives into the challenges the Sixian Regional Forum, the ARF,
Yeah.
faces in trying to create some trust and stability in such a contested environment.
Right, the South China Sea. It's like this never-ending geopolitical puzzle. So many overlapping claims, competing interests. How does the ARF even approach navigating that?
They're all about diplomacy, cooperation, think dialogue, joint exercises, transparency,
Yeah.
anything to lower the chances of miscommunication or something escalating into, a bigger conflict.
Yeah.
But honestly, it's a tough job.
It sounds like it, yeah. A very delicate situation.
It is. But the stakes are so high, right?
Absolutely.
I mean, the South China Sea is essential for global trade. It has so many resources, and it's strategically vital for a lot of countries.
Right.
Any kind of instability there could have, a ripple effect across the world.
It really underscores that security isn't just about military force. It's about managing those complex relationships, finding ways to work together even when there are disagreements. Sometimes, like you said, the best defense is a well-crafted conversation.
Couldn't have said it better myself. Okay, ready for a bit of a shift in gears.
Always. What do we have now?
Let's talk about biodiversity and disaster prevention.
Okay, that sounds interesting. But what does saving trees and, preventing floods have to do with national security?
Well, one of our sources makes a really strong case for what they call a holistic approach to security. They endo that environmental, economic, and social factors are all connected,
Okay, I'm starting to see the connection.
Yeah.
Like, if you have a natural disaster, it could destroy infrastructure, displace people, and that could lead to, instability or even conflict.
Exactly. And when you think about how many different ecosystems Indonesia has and all the challenges they face, earthquakes, volcanic eruptions, deforestation, rising sea levels.
Right.
it becomes clear that environmental security is a core part of national security.
It's like thinking globally but acting locally, right? Protecting the environment isn't just some nice thing to do. It's really connected to a nation's long-term security and well-being. It's about understanding that everything is connected.
And speaking of connections, let's dive into something that's often overlooked in discussions about security: the human element.
Okay.
One of our sources highlights the importance of psychological operations. PSYOP.
PSYOP. That sounds kind of intense, like something out of a spy movie.
Well, it's maybe not as glamorous as Hollywood makes it seem, but it is a powerful tool.
Yeah.
Basically, PSYOP uses communication strategies, things like leaflets, radio broadcasts, even social media campaigns, to influence how target audiences think and act.
So it's about winning hearts and minds, not just battles.
Exactly. It's
Yeah.
about undermining the enemy's morale, building support with the local population, and ultimately achieving your goals without just relying on force.
It makes a lot of sense. In today's world, information can be just as powerful as any weapon. But how do you even measure how effective PSYOP is? How do you know if those messages are actually working?
That's the tricky part. It's not like counting tanks or bombs. It's much harder to quantify.
Yeah.
But one of our sources dives into this issue, exploring how difficult it is to evaluate these PSYP campaigns in a world where media is constantly changing.
Yeah, with information coming at us from everywhere, all the time,
Uh,
how do you even track the impact of your message?
that's where it gets really interesting. The traditional ways of measuring PSYOP effectiveness, like surveys or focus groups, might not be enough anymore. We might need to look at new tools like social media analytics, sentiment analysis, maybe even AI,
Right.
to really understand how those messages are being received, interpreted, and shared online.
It's like we need a whole new set of tools for this digital age, even for something as seemingly intangible as, psychological warfare.
Exactly. And there's one more thing I want to touch on before we move on. The ethical side of PSYOP is really important too.
Absolutely. We're talking about influencing people's thoughts and actions, which comes with a lot of responsibility.
Totally. It's crucial to make sure that any PSYOP campaigns are done ethically, being truthful, transparent, and respecting people's dignity. There's a fine line between persuasion and manipulation, and we can't cross that line.
Right. A good reminder that even when we're talking about security, there are some lines we just shouldn't cross. So it's next. What other fascinating topics are hiding in our pile of sources?
Let's delve into the world of intelligence analysis, a field where sorting through mountains of data and connecting those seemingly random dots can make all the difference.
Intelligence analysis. It's like detective work, but on a global scale.
Yeah, I like that analogy. You're sifting through all these clues, trying to connect the dots and make sense of a world that's constantly changing.
And these days, it's not just about those classic intelligence sources like spies or satellites. It's also about this huge amount of information that's just out there in the open.
Mm.
News articles, social media posts, research.
Totally. It's like having this massive jigsaw puzzle with pieces scattered everywhere, both hidden and right out in the open.
Wow, that's a great image. So what's the biggest challenge for analysts? I mean, how do they even start to put that puzzle together?
Well, one of the toughest things is just the sheer volume of information. It's overwhelming. They need to process everything quickly, figure out what's important, separate the signal from the noise.
Right, it's not just about collecting data. It's about actually understanding it. It's about like asking the right questions, challenging what you think you know, and making those connections that other people might miss.
Exactly. And one of our sources talks about the specific challenges for analysts in the Asia-Pacific region, which, is going through a lot of change right now, both economically and geopolitically.
Yeah, that's a region where the stakes are incredibly high. You've got all these different powers competing for influence, territorial disputes, and then you add in the threat from non-state actors. It's a lot to handle. So what are some of the biggest obstacles for analysts trying to understand that region?
Like I said, the amount of information is one thing, but they also need a deep understanding of the local context. I mean, the Asia-Pacific is so diverse with so many different languages, cultures, histories. You can't just look at it from one perspective.
You're saying they need to be able to see the world through the eyes of the people they're analyzing, right?
Exactly. They need to understand their motivations, what they fear, what they hope for.
It's about empathy, isn't it? Really trying to see things from another person's point of view, even if you don't agree with them.
Exactly. And our sources also point out that analysts have to adapt to how quickly technology is changing. Think about things like AI, big data analytics, cyber warfare. It's a whole new game now.
Wow. So analysts need to be tech savvy too. It's like they have to be a detective, a cultural expert, and a data scientist all rolled into one.
That's a great way to put it. The most successful analysts are those who can combine all those different skills and perspectives to create insights that are accurate, that you can actually act on, and that are useful to the people making decisions.
It's a good reminder that intelligence isn't just about finding out secrets. It's about using information to make smart decisions, to be prepared for threats, and to navigate a world that's becoming more and more complex and interconnected.
That's it, exactly. And I think this brings us full circle to what we've been talking about today. Security in the 21st century is this multifaceted challenge that's constantly changing. And it requires a very holistic approach. We've seen how all these different pieces fit together: cybersecurity, maritime security, energy security, environmental security, even psychological security. They all contribute to a nation's overall security.
It's been quite a journey, hasn't it? We've gone from the digital world of cyber attacks to the mountains of Papua, from shipyards to the places where decisions are made. We've covered the technical, the strategic, and the human sides of security. And we've seen how all these things are connected in this intricate web that shapes how nations survive and thrive in an uncertain world.
And what's the big takeaway? I think it's that in today's world, you can't think about security in isolation. It's not about building walls or stockpiling weapons. It's about understanding how everything is connected and taking this more comprehensive approach to security, one that includes everything from cybersecurity and environmental protection to economic strength and social unity.
It's about realizing that true security goes way beyond military power or technology. It's about having a resilient society, a strong economy, a healthy environment, and a government that's accountable to its people. It's about creating a world where everyone feels safe, secure, and has the opportunity to reach their full potential.
Couldn't have said it better.
So as we wrap up our deep dive today, we want to leave you with this thought. In a world that never stops changing, the pursuit of security is never really over. It's an ongoing process, a journey of learning, adapting, and working together to build a future that's more peaceful, more prosperous, and more resilient for everyone.
I agree. It's a journey we're all on together.
Until next time, stay curious, stay engaged, and stay ahead of the curve.